Hey, HTDA, and today I have a guide for you on how to quickly complete the other realms once you've completed the first one. Now, I would highly recommend you check out my mega base video on how to construct a nice little layout like this, so that makes everything else after that easier, but it's not strictly necessary if you don't want to. First and foremost, I would highly recommend that you set up a nice power structure on your starting realm, because that will make everything else after that a lot easier. All you need to do that is mana canopies. These are extremely overpowered buildings that make all the other leaves that you have in production that much more powerful. And if you combine those with these primordial mana wells along with some mana pools, you will have enough power production during the day to also last you throughout the night when these mana leaves are not producing anything. There's two reasons I would highly recommend that you do this. First of all, that just means that this entire factory keeps running. You can put boxes in stuff so you have all of the things you need. You can automate some of the more higher tier productions. For example, you need like 500 of certain things, especially the more higher tier buildings like the verdant collectors are really annoying to make manually. So yeah, automate those if you want to, and by the time you get back, you will have hundreds of those waiting for you in your old base. In order to get to a new realm, you're going to need these live keystones, or keystones in general, to go through a portal. Now, we've already built our base, at least if you were following along with me. Our base is right next to one of the portals. It should be somewhere up here. There we go. But remember that the live keystones are a one-way ticket. So as soon as you go through a portal, you can use a keystone to get from the live realm to the other realm. In this case, it's going to be the water realm. Then you can't get back until you actually have the water keystone available to you on the other side. So keep that in mind before you start running through. It is also really important that you think about what type of things you're going to bring through the portal, because you can't get back for a while. So in that case, I would highly recommend that you make some of these collector units, the specialized collector units to be specific, so that you can easily pick up those resources. You want some of the production buildings, a little bit of everything, but some of those buildings you won't need as many of as others. And of course some grippers to go along with that. Now, as you can see, I didn't actually bring normal grippers because those are very cheap to produce, but I did bring some of the earth ones because I won't be able to get earth access on the other plane. Speaking of which, it's actually really easy to determine upfront what type of things you're going to need on a different realm, but it will be different per realm. So right now we're on the life realm, where we have access to a life element, the water element, and the earth element. So it's the two adjacent elements that we have on this particular realm. The same applies to the other realms as well. So if we go to the water realm, for example, we'll have access to life, water, and the other one that is going to be air. That's the new one. But we won't have access to things like earth, for example, or fire or shadow, which are in the other quadrants of this area. So keep in mind what you're going to need, because there's no point in bringing things like stonecutters, for example, to a earth realm or to the water realm if you're not going to have access to earth modes over there. This knowledge will also help you plan ahead a little bit on what to bring and what you can kind of leave behind if needed. So for example, I'm bringing collectors for the types of resources that are going to be on that plane, but I'm also bringing a couple of things, for example, the grippers that I can't produce, at least not easily produce, on the other plane. So reaching grippers I think are extremely useful. I want a lot of those, but I won't be able to get earth modes on the water plane where I'm going to, so I'm bringing a couple of extra of these. Similarly, you want some belts. I really like the verdant streams because they transport not just items but also power, and of course things like mana roots in order to transport your power, ways to produce power, ways to store power, and some assortment of the production buildings. Honestly, these are kind of optional. You don't necessarily need to bring them. You can easily produce them on the plane that you go to, because by the time you need them, you will have access to the resources you need to do so. Another thing I really like to bring is boxes, again, because I don't have earth modes on the plane I'm going to. Just keep in mind you need to bring a little bit of everything, and I would recommend that you fill up your entire inventory before you go. Last but not least, you definitely want to connect your portal to whatever realm you're leaving. So for example, over here you can connect the mana roots to this portal over here and actually transport power you're producing on this plane to the other plane. You don't need to have the portal open in order for that to function. It actually just works. So this is going to be really awesome. It's also something you don't need to do and you want to be careful about. So I'm actually going to show you how to build your entire base without connecting power, because if you get really unlucky, you might run into trouble if you rely on this too much. Anyway, collect all your stuff, get your keystone, plug it into the portal, it will start charging up. I am actually not bringing these with me because I don't have any use on the other side, and you can go through. And voila, we are in a brand new realm where we can start building stuff. However, like I said before, it's really important to notice that you can bring your power with you. I didn't do that right now, and you'll see why in a moment. I would recommend, if you go to the water realm like I'm doing right now, that you stick to the north because there's a nice open area. In general, what I would recommend if you're on a new plane, try to find an area that if you completely zoom out, you have open building space of approximately one screen. That gives you plenty of room to pretty much build everything you need in order to keep everything nice and clean. You don't get into too much spaghetti, but you still have plenty of room to expand. That also means that you're going to need to set up some power, especially if you go through the portal without hooking everything up, but that's super easy at this point because you can just set up some of these canopies. You will start generating plenty of power. Again, make sure you attach a mana well for that so it also functions during the night. And there you go, we have power set up. Now I did that in the south because, again, we're going to be building the factory to the north, and you're about to see why I said you might get really unlucky if you're relying on external power too much. Because the first thing you want to do is start to set up some basics. Again, just like in my mega base video, make sure you leave 3 squares between every single production line, so you can fit in some mana blooms if you need. You can see the verdant streams connecting everything up with power makes everything a lot more cleaner and easier. Having the binaries available also makes for very efficient salt production. So all in all, this is not very complicated, it's very easy to set up, but look at this, as soon as you start messing with the mana fields or the mode fields, you will have these new rifts spawning. Now, as far as I can tell, the locations of these rifts are kind of random, so they might spawn in a very awkward position. For example, over here, it spawned right on top of some of the water elemental modes I was going to be using. Now, luckily, there's plenty of those on these realms, but yeah, this is kind of in the way. Now, luckily, these things don't get too big, but they are big enough to be kind of in the way. Now, if this spawns in a awkward position that coincides with a production line, or more importantly a power line, it's going to mess things up. Now, this rift actually doesn't just exist in this realm, it also exists in the other realm that you just left. So these rifts are kind of overlapping the different realms. So before, like I showed you, my power line was running like right over here down to the south. If this rift would have spawned here, I would have no more power. So yeah, things like that can really get in the way, can be really annoying. Don't panic about it too much. If you get really unlucky, you might want to reload a save a few minutes earlier, because I do think it's random. But yeah, keep it in mind. Things might happen. Now we're going to be dealing with these things, don't worry. This is the whole point of part of this episode. But for the moment, we're just going to have to work around them. Now, ideally, you already completed the Downpour Bastion research on the previous realm, but if not, this is the first thing you want to focus on. And having those available is super easy because they kind of like rain down on the enemy like entropy over here. All you need to do is put in some elemental water and they will keep functioning. As you can see, it doesn't rain too fast. If you put a box next to here and you just put a couple of stacks in there, that will keep you running for like an hour or so. So you don't need to refill it too often. It's super easy to produce this stuff on this particular realm. So this is why I'm going into the direction of this realm first, just because it's so easy to handle the rifts if you already have access to the Downpour Bastions. One of the main goals that I have for going to the water realm first is the fact that we can get all the way up to the Undate research. It's a difficult word to pronounce for some reason for me. This is actually going to require a lot of resources to complete, but it's mostly the water resources, of course. And once you have this, then the rifts do not just keep the kind of like this fog back, but it will actually start closing the rift as well. It takes a little while, but once the rift is closed, it won't come back, it won't respawn anymore. Okay, so with the rifts under control, you want to start expanding a little bit and just focus on getting some of the basics up and running so that makes it easier to expand. So you want some pedestals, some of these belts and some grippers. You want all of the basic types of prisms and elemental productions, just so you can start producing the things that you're going to need in bulk. As you can see, I'm not actually setting up that much life and water production over here, just some of the things that I'm actively using, or things that you might need for research. Now, actually, in my experience, I do this too little, so do as I say, not as I do. I highly recommend that any building that you are going to need in mass production, that you automate or semi-automate. So, for example, you're going to need hundreds of these mana pools. Let's see, it's going to be like almost 1,000, I think, of mana pools in order to complete all these researches. So automating mana pools production, for example, is going to be super useful if you just want to be efficient about things and not have to handcraft thousands of buildings. Speaking of handcrafting, in this particular game, unlike in some other factory games, you don't necessarily just need more and more and more of the same stuff. In fact, you're just going to need to be specializing your factory into certain directions and then shifting that direction because whatever you were making before is no longer needed as much. Which is also the reason that I really like using these boxes. They're just completely automating a lot of things is of course efficient in the long run, but it also means you need a lot of resources to go into your factory in order to make that viable. While if you work with these boxes, yes, you do need to hand fill this, but you can fill in a whole lot of resources at the same time. And you can make sure that, for example, whenever I actually need mana roots, I have mana roots, but once I have enough of those, I can just pull them out of the box. For example, over here, I can just put the tablets in here, and now I'm going to be producing several hundred mana roots over here, semi-automated, but I do need to come back every now and then. But in the meanwhile, I might need some more of these shifting slabs in order to make belts, for example, and I put those in this box over here. Now, again, belts are something you need a lot of, but you don't need infinite amounts of. Hooking everything up to slab production, however, would lead to a lot of spaghetti. So it's completely up to you if you don't mind the spaghetti or you like making like massive factories completely dedicated to one or two different buildings. That is fine. This just keeps the profile of your factory relatively slow, and therefore it is quite efficient to just hand fill things without getting into too much spaghetti. Next up on the list is bringing in the new type of resource that is unique to this plane, or not unique, but that is new at least to this plane, and that is going to be air in my case. Again, the same principle applies. It's really kind of just repeating things that you've already done before. However, the more interesting things will come after this. In this case, we're going to make some air elementals, and we're going to be starting some research. Remember, you need all the basics, so things like salt prisms and things like that for that research as well. And you want multiple of these pedestals and in altars in order to make this more efficient, so you can do multiple things at the same time. Of course, you want to scale up your production a little bit, and if you need to scale up your power production as well, as you can see, I did that down here. I added some more stuff, so I have more production, more mana pools and things like that to go along with that. Having access to all of these more advanced grippers and things like that straight from the get-go because you brought them along with you is going to make setting up a similar factory to the one you have on the live playing a lot easier and a lot quicker than what you did the first time, so don't worry about that too much. And then you're going to want to kind of streamline towards the more advanced research. Now, the main reason that we're going to kind of streamline all the way to over here is because the main thing that we want to unlock is the quartz that we're going to need in order to start unlocking water mastery. Once we have this, we can make a water keystone, and we can actually start traveling back to our home plane as well. And we basically just doubled the size of our factory because we have access to everything again. And I just want to stress, you don't need much in order to do that. As you can see, this is my entire factory other than the supply lines I have running into my factory. And honestly, half of this you don't really need. The main reason I did build a couple of these reef crafters is because having access to these more advanced materials is going to speed things up later. But you don't need that in order to start to unlock your first few things. And of course, speaking about speeding things up, remember you can use multiple different altars for the same research if you want to just focus on one thing and get it completed faster. With every single technology you unlock, you become more powerful, you have more options, and everything else will become easier. So for example, the binaries are just super efficient. As you can see here, I expanded my production a little bit to make sure I have enough to make all of those elementals. And I really love how these air grippers work. I mean, look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? They're a little bit more versatile as well than the normal grippers. So the combination of these ones with the reaching grippers is just superb for pretty much anything you might want to do. But then again, there's a pretty nice case to make as well for the, what are these called again? The root-bound grippers, because they expand power and things like that. So just having access to all these options will make your life easier and easier if you expand through the different realms. Once you get access to the quartz production, you have a choice to make. You can either stay on this realm and just complete as much technology as you can, which is very useful because there's, again, pretty much everything you unlock is going to be useful. That said, not everything is really essential. So, for example, the air elementals will allow you to provide you with a different type of power, with air power, which is going to be running all day. It's going to be on a different power network, so that's a thing I'll come back to in a second. But most of this stuff isn't super needed. That actually holds for pretty much everything in the technology tree at higher levels. All of it is nice. It is not strictly needed. A couple of things I would point out to be extremely useful though. So if you're going to focus on anything, I would recommend these things. So first of all, you have the inundate that I was talking about earlier. That is going to allow you to actually actively completely remove those rifts. That is super useful, very hard to argue against. Then there's a couple of other things, for example, the coral pool over here that I mentioned before as well, which is going to allow you to make infinite amount of modes of a certain type once you have access to this. And I think that is probably it. There's a lot of quality of life things. For example, the radiant roots over here is one that I really like because that allows you to make those roots connect power even easier than before. I think there's a bloom range increase as well, yeah, as you can see over here. So that is very useful as well. But again, it's useful, but not strictly needed. So at this point, if you want to find yourself a new portal and go through that, you can. Would I recommend to do so? I don't know. Honestly, it's probably the most efficient way, but it does get quite chaotic if you're trying to complete too many parts of the technology tree at the same time. You can. It is, again, probably most efficient. But it is a lot of running around and automating things and kind of leaving things half completed behind, which is something that really annoys me, really bugs me. But again, getting the first initial couple of things completed is probably going to be the most efficient, and it only takes maybe a couple of hours to set up a base facility on every single one of the elemental planes. And by that I mean a couple of hours per plane. If you're a little bit more of a completionist like I am, what you might want to do instead is hop back to your life plane and just make sure you start completing the endgame technologies you have available over here. Now you have access to both these keystones. You have a lot of high-level technologies to complete, but again, it also means you can complete things like the coral pool, and some other things might be easier to complete because you simply have more resources available to you. And because these two initial factories are very close together, if you followed my build, because they're right next to the portal, it's actually going to take only a few seconds to hop in and out your portals. Now, once you do go back, I want to stress, you will get new rifts to spawn on your live portal as well. You can see right over here exactly what I was warning about. If my power line would have been running through here, yeah, I would no longer have power, at least not the power from this base, into my other base anymore. So if you get unlucky with where your rifts spawn, I don't think we have any rifts in the main factory actually, so that is lucky. But you can get into very awkward situations if you're not careful about that. Speaking of power, we now have access to wind power, which you generate by placing down wind turbines and that you transport by using gust funnels that have a pretty awkward pattern, honestly, in order to transport power from A to B. So it gets a bit of a design puzzle if you want to actively use this to power your base. The problem with different types of power is that these don't communicate with each other. So you can see I connected everything up right next to each other with my mana roots and my gust funnels and things like that. But still, this is not going to talk to each other, not even if I put it down like this, for example. As you can see, I'm just getting the solar power here. I'm just getting the wind power here. Now, in order to still have benefit from this wind power, even though I can't connect that directly up, this is where the mana pools and especially the larger mana wells are coming in. Because what I can do is actually connect my gust funnels up to my mana pools, because that just works just fine. As you can see, stored power, almost 3 million. And then what also works just fine is that these mana roots are drawing the power from the same mana well. So you can see I still have the same 3 million power stored over here that I have over here. It's not exactly the same because not all of these mana wells are connected up, but the larger ones are. So you can use the mana wells to transform one type of power into a different system, thereby using the same power system throughout your entire factory across all the different realms. Which you know is quite useful because that means you can start using these coral pools in large numbers, make an infinite amount of modes out of them, make sure you never run out of resources ever again. The problem with these coral pools is they cost a massive amount of power. Luckily, because we can now hook up all our different power systems together, we can generate an obscene amount of power. This is me not even trying to produce power and already up to, what is it, 35, 36? I think it actually goes up to 60,000 or something like that during the main parts of the day. You can see I have plenty of power stored as well. This was actually running out a little bit. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, you can just keep adding in more and more power, keep adding in more and more coral pools, and you've pretty much won the game. Well, not entirely. You still have plenty of work to do, but at least you can kind of optimize your factory around infinite amounts of resources now. Now, just to be clear, as you can see, I have a coral pool here running up. Every time one of these plants kind of completes, you will get one single mote. So this is not going to win you any prizes in terms of production speed. This is just to make sure you never run out of a resource, but in order to progress through your different realms, you're definitely going to want to use either a lot of coral pools or just some of the basic materials you have available to you. Anyway, with 2 factories at your disposal, you can pretty swiftly start kicking out some of these more advanced researches, and especially once you get access to the inundated I've mentioned now several times, you can actively start clearing out these rifts and make sure that your factory is completely safe. And with that upgrade up and running, slowly you will see these rifts starting to disappear. So if you compare this one to this one over here, you can already see it's kind of fading out, and it will continue to fade out slowly and slowly. However, don't be too quick on removing your bastions just yet. You want to wait with removing these things until the rain stops. As you can see right now, there's no visible rift anymore. The rain completely stopped, and this is when you can start deleting these things. If you delete them too early and the rain is still going, and you can see I have some nasty rifts spawning over here as well. If you remove them too early, the rift will start regenerating again, and you run into trouble. Speaking of trouble, I've actually had rifts spawn in the middle of my base as well, and if that happens to you, don't panic. You can deal with it. But yes, it is going to be annoying, and this is why I recommend getting that upgrade as soon as possible, because you can just permanently get rid of that rift just after a little bit of work, just by placing down a single bastion, dump a box with a couple of stacks of elementals next to it, and after a few minutes it will be gone. But you know, it doesn't take too much work at this point anymore to start up your second mega base, as you can see over here. This looks almost identical to my first one, but yeah, I have 2 of these bases now, and there's no rifts inside anymore because I cleaned them all out with the use of some of these bastions. It is worth noting, by the way, that even if you clear out a rift, you can still have these small patches remain. It's not a problem. You can just kind of like copy paste one of these, make sure that it is powered, and then clear it out. But for some reason, the patches don't go away if the rift is already gone. So you might need to be aware of that, because if you try to run any power through here, for example, that doesn't quite work. Just a little reminder. All in all, this makes for very easy and fast progress through your different realms and through the rest of this game. It's really enjoyable. It still is a little bit of a puzzle dealing with all the various types of buildings and things like that. But doing it like this, make sure you stay in control all the time, and you can do this as structured and as spaghetti-less as possible while leveraging all the previous work you did on the other realms, so you don't need to feel like you start over and over. As a side note, if you're watching this, look at this, we have multiple hotbars now. This was just entered into the game as I was recording this, so thank you developers, I was waiting for this. This is going to make your life so much easier. Yeah, so that is very much appreciated. Remember, guys, this game is still in early access. Things might change along the way. But for so far, they have been increasing for the better pretty much every week. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this game goes. If you have any questions or specific things you would like to cover me in a different video coming up, let me know in the comments. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.